Hello everyone. As all of us know that we have already finished our chapter number 1, the Uprising of 1857. This chapter number 2 is correlated with the first one. All the causes for the uprising of 1857 and the consequences of the uprising of 1857 led to the growth of nationalism. So the chapter number 2, factors promoting the growth of nationalism and foundation of the Indian National Congress. So, how nationalism arose in India? As all of us know that the English came to India as traders. Then, when the Britishers started to make changes in political, economical, military, social, religious fields, according to their interest and benefits, it's created resentment among the Indians. So they started with the establishment of company. Then when they knew that the Indians are openly receiving them, they started the policy of expansion and economic exploitation. We have already learned that how did they follow the policy of expansion, that is annexation of the states, the doctrine of lapse, abolition of pension and titles, and economic exploitation, that is one-way trade. And moreover, they took raw material to their country, and our artisans and handicraftsmen were without work and they had nothing to earn. And the next one, the revolt of 1857 and its failure also led to the nationalism, because many of the Indians were in the support of Britishers, in desire to get some reward, promotion, etc. from the Britishers. Economic exploitation by the British Crown. So now the first economic exploitation and the second economic exploitation, what is the difference? The first exploitation took place when the company was ruling India. And then after the 1857, as a result of 1857, the rule of company came to an end. Then the economic exploitation started by the British Crown. Now they did it very openly. They do not have to justify their exploitation. And spread of political consciousness. The religious reformers, the press, the literature, all these filled what spread the knowledge of political consciousness among the Indian, which later on gave what fueled the fire for nationalism. Then rise of the nationality. So all these factors what promoted the growth of nationalism in India. So it does mean that the nationalism denotes patriotism. Nationalism is nothing but the love for your own country. So when Indians started to realize that how much they love their country, this feeling compelled, they forced this feeling, the particular feeling of nationalism, forced the people to overthrow foreign domination and become free in 1947. So, starting with the factors promoting the growth of nationalism or the causes for the rise of the national movement, in the words of Professor Moon, he said that the British imperialism, you know, right? Expansion of the colonies is called as imperialism. The British idea of expanding their own colonies in India gave a political unity under third party in spite of many discordant elements in the Indian society. Though the Indian society considered them different on the basis of their religious caste, complexion, etc., they still came together. When it comes to the nationalism, everyone is uniformed. So the first factor for the growth of nationalism was British policy of economic exploitation. India was considered to be one of the richest country or the region in the world during the 17th and 18th century. The richness of our country was far famed and it attracted many intruders to our country actually. So the British was one among them. The British policy of economic exploitation was the main intention to promote their own interest. Whatever they did in the favor of industrialization or creating machinery goods and all, it was all their interest. Whatever the changes they made in the trade and commerce, it was only for their own benefit. So now the Indian understood that the main motive of the British was to exploit and oppress the people of India with the help of policy of economic exploitation. So whatever the economic system of India was there, it was adjusted according to the needs of the people of England. The Britishers were looting India, but according to the need of the England people, not for the welfare of our citizens of India, actually, not for our welfare. So they started with the drain of wealth of India. How did they started this drain theory? So first they started with the farmers. Many of the farmers were forced to grow jute and cotton for the factories in England. They were not allowed to grow food crops. And then when agriculture in India was not improving, they did not take any steps to encourage the agriculture. And agriculture was main occupation of India at that time. And whatever the raw material was extracted from Indian resources, it was exported to England at cheaper rates. And not only that, goods manufactured in England were dumped into Indian market and sold at higher prices. So see here, they will buy the raw material at cheaper rate and they will dump the finished goods in Indian market for higher prices. So it was completely a drain of wealth. And this policy ruined the cottage industries, and handicraftsmen and the artisans, they started to starve. They did not have any livelihood and they were deprived of their means of livelihood. If there is no raw material, how they will work for their family? And free trade, and one more thing was free trade means whatever the raw material they exported to England, it was a free of tax. But whatever the finished goods they brought to India to sell at higher prices were taxed. So this is called as free trade. And this hit the Indian trade and industry really very badly. So the British officers working in India were heavy drain on the Indian resources, actually, because they got high salaries and the salaries were paid from the Indian government. And next one, educated Indians were unemployed. This also created or aroused the growth of nationalism. Why? Because educated Indians were dissatisfied. They were not appointed to high posts. And especially the middle classes suffered from the unemployment. So the English, actually, they never cared for welfare of the masses and they almost ignored all kind of welfare activities, such as like education, then irrigation, health services, all these they completely ignored. How I can say that? There were so many frequent famines, drought and epidemics in India at that moment. And the Britishers did not even bother to look at it. For example, one of the situation of Lord Lytton, he organized a big, actually, darbar when the Empress Queen Victoria was coming to India. And during that time, Pune was going through a large famine, drought and epidemics, actually. And they celebrated Silver Jubilee at the cost of the Indian economy. This created a lot of resentment among the Indians. Then economic salvation. So now the Indians thought that preserving their own economy is the only way to come up on these Britishers, or else they will have to work under the Britishers for the rest of their lives. So it was like do or die situation. So these are the policies of economic exploitation by the Britishers. Next one, effect of the Great Uprising of 1857. We have already learned how the revolt took place. The ill treatment shown to Bahadur Shah II, the treatment given to Nana Sahib and Rani of Jhansi, and military exploitations, the annexation of the states. All these reasons were there. That immediate cause, the Greece cartages, was the reason for the revolt of 1857. So, what was the aftermath of this revolt? So, it was the Indian revolted against the cruel rule of Britishers in India and their policy of political expansion and economic exploitation. The main intention of the uprising of 1857 was economic exploitation and also the political expansion. So the English crushed the revolt ruthlessly, as all we know. There was like hundreds and thousands of killing in Delhi, in Punjab, and they committed many atrocities. And atrocities means what? Cruel killings or fightings are called as atrocities. And atrocities were not what considered only by the Britishers. Even Indian followed that. They burnt many British offices, jails, etc. And many people were killed on both the sides. So the British began to suspect the Indians now, Indians' loyalty. There was distrust between English and Indians now, because the way the Indians have revolted against the Britishers thought that they can do it one more time in the future. So discontent and affection among the Indians now. The way the Britishers were ruling Indians, the Indians had no feeling for Britishers now. There was only hatred against them. So it gave birth to new political conscience and strengthened the sentiment of the nationalism. So all together, all this reason, it gave a hard blow to the Indians to understand that the nationalism is the only way out of this rule actually. And sooner there was a general national awakening which gave rise to the nationalism in India. Next one, British imperialism. Imperialism, as we all often know, extending of their empire is called as imperialism. It was during the British rule that the entire country from Himalayan to Cape Comorin was brought under one government. When the Britishers were ruling India in different parts by dividing them into different parts and divisions, they were not able to concentrate on whole of India. So they came up with an idea that the India will be centralized, one central government for whole India. But they did not thought that the whole India, when it is united, it could be a very heavy blow for the Britishers. So when they made the central, like one government for the whole India, it established a strong unity among the Indians. So, and they introduced uniform system of law and administration in the country. Okay, so uniform, whatever the law comes up in India, it is applicable to each and everyone. Now we are doing the same thing. When Prime Minister Modi gives out any announcement, it is applicable to each and every individual or citizen of India actually. Just like that, this one government was established after the revolt of 1857 itself. And the economic and political unification. So when it comes to the economic and political unification, the India had never witnessed such political unity before. Okay, the people of India began to think and act as one nation. The people from different part of the country began to meet and understand each other. So it became easier to spread the feeling of nationalism to every nook and corner of the country. Okay, this unified the Indians. Okay, and they joined them as one nation. Now there was no caste, no religion, there was no borders or boundaries that divided the Indians. Everyone considered India as one nation, and saving it from the hands of the Britishers was the only motto. And the only reason, the only aim was to encourage the people of India to uproot the British imperialism. So this way, the one nation theory worked really well, and they started it was really when it became one nation. So it was very easy to spread nationalism. So all these reasons created anti-imperialist feelings in Indians. Anti-imperialist means they will not allow the Britishers to extend their colonies. Next one. Depressive colonial policies. When it comes to the depressive colonial policies from like after 1857, when the Indian government was transferred in the hands of the British Crown, as we all know that governor generals were replaced by viceroys. Now there were no governor general to look after India, but there were viceroys who is to come to India, and there was a Secretary of State in England who is to send these viceroys to India to look after and report him. So when it comes to viceroy, Lord Canning was the first one. So Lord Lytton, Viceroy Lord Lytton, when he came to India in 1876 as Viceroy, he followed some repressive measures against the Indians. This really created dissatisfaction in Indian minds, and it gave a heavy blow for the nationalism. The first one was Vernacular Press Act of 1878. During this time, what happened? Vernacular Act press means what? The Indian directors, that the Indian newspaper will not publish anything without the consent of the Britishers. Whatever they will publish in the newspaper, it has to go through the Britishers. Then only they can publish, or else no. If they say no, they cannot publish all this. Why did they do so? Because they thought that if the writers start publishing the nationalism articles in newspaper, it will create one more revolt against them. So they stopped this. They took a measure to stop this. And Arms Act of 1878. According to this Arms Act, the Indians cannot have any kind of weapons under them without the license. They should have license, okay, for the possession of the arms by any Indian. And when it comes to the Britisher, it was not applicable. So they felt unjustifying that only the Britishers can have the weapons, and if the Indians have to have the weapons, they have to take the license first. And fixation of age limit for candidates from 21 to 19 years at the Indian Civil Service examination. First of all, the civil service examination had to be given in England. And they also limited the age now, 21 to 19. They made it 21 to 19. And according to this, he deliberately reduced this age because so that he can debar the Indian youth for competing for Indian civil service. He wanted the Britishers to be appointed as the Indian civil service officers, not the Indians. So he made it compulsory. Next one, Viceroy Lord Curzon. So Lord Curzon came to India in 1899, and he took many measures for his sweeping changes in the field of education. He tried to change the education system of India. And starting with that, he came up with the idea of this Act of 1898. So this Act of 1898, which made it an offence to provoke people against the British, which is with the connection of the Vernacular Press Act of 1878. If they cannot publish anything against the British, it is the same like the Act of 1898. So according to this act, what will happen? Nobody can gather against the Britishers. And next one, the Calcutta Corporation Act in 1899. So he passes the Calcutta Corporation Act in 1899, which reduced the strength of elected members from India, giving the British majority. So in the parliament, the British Crown Parliament, most of the members were Britishers. So obviously whatever the decision taken in favor of country will be in the hands of the Britishers, because the member of the parliaments were Britishers and less majority, and minorities were the Indians. Next one, Indian University Act of 1904. He passed this act, to impose strict official control over the Indian universities, because there were so many leaders who started to inspire the youth, and the colleges are the places where the youth is the most. So he introduced Indian Universities Act to to stop these gatherings, to control over the Indian university and the youth, because he considered them as the center of Indian nationalism. And next comes partition of Bengal in 1905. He tried to divide Bengal on the basis of many reasons. He said that the Bengal province is too large to be taken care by one general, one officer, and the population of this province is too high, so we cannot control. So he with these excuses he tried to partition Bengal, okay, in 1905. So this field, into that is also into East Bengal and West Bengal. He really wanted to divide Bengal because of the heavy population and the large province. He could have divided anyhow, but he did not do so. He divided Bengal in like East Bengal and West Bengal, where in one of the Bengal only Hindus and another Bengal only Muslims. So this created resentment, fueled the national sentiments in the country. Next one is binding influence of the means of transport and communication. We know that transport like railways were established, introduced, and communication, telegraph was established. But Indians thought that these are to punish them if they do not convert to Christianity. But it really helped for the growth of nationalism. How it helped? So the improvements in the means of transport and communication quickened the pace of free movement in the country. Now, for example, if somebody is trying or planning something against the British in East India, then that message was transferred to the West or North or South India with these telegraphs or railways transportations. So it created a pace of free movement in the country. Like anybody can send any kind of message to anybody, and everyone was aware of the British rule. Then the British built roads and railways and set up post and telegraph offices in India. And because of this, the leaders used these means to carry the message of the national movement to all parts of the country. This means enable the leaders and the people to meet together, and a sense of unity started to arise in Indians. It helped to discuss and chalk out plans for the uprooting of the British rule. And it brought them together, and it worked as a messenger for the leaders. It was very helpful for them. Next one, Western thoughts and education. As we know, they made it compulsory to learn English or Bible in schools and jails. And the British imparted Western education to run the administration. They wanted some petty clerk to work for them, or they wanted civil service officers for their company, their rule. So they imparted Western education in arts and science through the medium of English, so that these educated Indians can serve their administration, and they only wanted petty clerks, means small clerks to run the administration. So through Western education, they wanted to propagate Western culture to win the loyalty of the educated Indians. They started to make the Indian feel like they have some standard when they understand Western education. But it really, the result was very contrary result. Okay, the spread of education, western education, the Indians came to know the history of the Britishers. So what was exactly the history of the Britishers? So the Indians came into contact with the West, and they learned about the modern, rational, secular, democratic, America, England. They came to know that the English themselves hanged their own king, Charles I, as he was cruel and very atrocide. So they hanged their own king when he was not able to taking care of the people, his subjects. And the Indians also studied that the same Britishers forced their king James II to abdicate means like resign or leave, okay, leave the throne, as they came, he was not taking care of the subjects again. So when the Indians came to know about the history of the Britishers, it gave and fuel to their nationalism. They thought that they can also throw off their cruel foreign rulers. Not only this, when the Indian started to get education, they learnt about American Revolution. Even 13 colonies of America were under the rule of Britishers. So how did the American, overthrow their power? And then the French Revolution, in which the king was not taking care of the citizens, so they broke the jail and they revolted against their own king, then they hanged him. And the other revolution in Europe inspired the Indians with the ideas of liberty, freedom, equality, uniformity, and fraternity, feeling of brotherhood. Now, the most important one, what helped the Indians to form nationalism, is that the English language, children. The English language, it became a medium of exchange of thoughts between the people of different part of the country. Now they were able to propagate, modern ideas. It acted as a medium of exchange. The uniform system of education through the English language throughout India produced unity of thought, ideas, and feeling. Now they could share their thoughts, they could write books, that led to the Indian press and literature. How the language learned with the help of the Britishers became a powerful weapon against the same. So now how the Indian press, with the help of the education provided by the Britishers, revolted against the Britishers. Now first one, publication of many newspapers. When the press was introduced by the Britishers in India, the Indians used it to publish their own ideas and like drain theory, how the Britishers were trying to exploit their economic, and how they wanted to get over the political system of India. Like there were so many newspapers like Amrit Bazar Patrika, the Hindu, the Patriot, the Maratha, the Kesari. Maratha and Kesari were written by Tilak actually. Okay. And Azad, the Indian Mirror, the Tribune, the Advocate, the Kohinoor, etc. were the newspaper of that time. They, with the help of these newspapers, they aroused political consciousness among the people. Whatever the decision taken by Britishers in favor or against the Indian, they got to know. Now each and every one got to know about the schemes or the policies opted by the Britishers. And like the national literature played a very important role, like B.C. Chatterjee, Rabindranath Tagore, Vishnu Shastri, Bharatendu, Harishchandra, Dinbandhu Mitra, Hali, Sir Syed Ahmad Khan inspired the youth with their works like books and all. And one of the famous Anand Mat, written by B.C. Chatterjee, a Bengali novel, became the Bible of modern Bengali patriotism. It contained the national song Vande Mataram. Now even today, on the day of independence and republic, we sing this song with so much of pride. Next one is discovery of India's glorious past. India history of India was hidden under the sculptures, inscriptions, which one was not discovered by the Indians. But the foreign scholars like Sir William Jones, Max Muller, Cunningham, Marshall, Jacobi, A.B. Kidd, these people started to dig the history. They came up with so many, powerful rulers of India. Many Britishers, many Britishers propagated the theory that the Indians had never been able to govern themselves. So, but with the help of the same foreign rulers, the Indians understood that how rich our Indian culture and heritage was. So, the Indian writers like Bhandarkar, Ranade, Ahar Prasad Shastri threw light on the greatness and the glory of ancient India, which helped alternatively for the arousing of nationalism. Ninth, the words of these scholars aroused the feeling of self-respect. They understood that we cannot sell our self-esteem and work under the Britishers with such heavy abuses and humiliation. They understood that what actually self-respect is and self-confidence. Indians thought that the Britishers are invincible. But with the help of the history of their own British past, it created self-confidence, it inbuilt self-confidence in Indian. And the patriotism, how they fought against others, and nationalism among the people. So the discovery of India was quite an important part of nationalism actually. Without knowing the Chanakya's Arthashastra, how well they looked after our country, okay, then Vijayanagara Empire, then Harshvardhan Empire, all these Guptas, Ashoka, all these things, it really encouraged the Indian leaders. Next one, social religious reform movement. So when is social reformers like Raja Ram Mohan Roy, Swami Dayanand Saraswati, Jyotiba Phule, Swami Vivekananda, Annie Besant, etc. carried out many social religious reforms, and they created a way for the national movement. Social reform inspired the people with ideas of self-respect, self-confidence, and self-reliance. So they aroused the feeling of patriotism in the and nationalism in the people. So when it comes to this social reforms, the first comes when it comes to the social reforms, the credit for starting this reformation is in modern India undoubtedly goes for Raja Ram Mohan Roy actually. To change India for the betterment, he laid the foundation of Brahmo Samaj in 1828, just for the upliftment of the Samaj, the society. And with the help of William Bentinck, he abolished the sati system, and he also declared it as legal offense. Means if it occurs in India, it is punishable. Same with the connection with this abolition of sati system, he also made he supported remarriage of the widows. If he abolished only sati system, what would they do after the death of the husband? Who will look after them? So in with connection with this sati system, he made compulsory, not compulsory, but he supported remarriage. If the widow wants to marry one more time then she has the right to remarry if she wishes to. And he made the Indians political conscious, and for this reason, the way he spread the political ideas to the Indians with the help of the education, he was called the father of Indian nationalism actually. Next, the icon of social reform is Jyotiba Phule. He laid the foundation of Satya Shodhak Samaj in 1873, and just for the upliftment of the different classes. He thought that no class or caste is backward. So he wanted to give equal opportunity to everyone to participate in whether it is nationalism or any other field. It might be education, work, artistry, anything. He wanted every class to come forward. So he was called Mahatma Jyotiba Phule for his literary work called as Tales of Untouchables. And he did a great work for the upliftment of the depressed classes, means backward classes. And for the same reason, actually he established, he found Satyashodhak Samaj. And not only that, he opened many schools for the upliftment of the downtrodden people, the poor people. Okay. And apart from Rajram Mohan Roy and Jyotiba Phule, there were other reformers as well. The great leaders like Lokmanya Tilak, Rabindranath Tagore, Pandit Motilal Nehru, Lal Lajpat Rai, Mahatma Gandhi, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, etc. played role in rousing the people from the deep slumber, deep sleep, drowsiness, the drowsiness, sleep, slumber, and inspired them with the new ideas and inspiration. And they also developed in them the spirit of sacrifice. If you really love something, you need to sacrifice for it. And how to love their own motherland, and what it is called to be love for the motherland. We being the Indian, we call our motherland as mother, mom, mata. So all these feelings, were aroused with the help of the literary works, and one of the slogan Lokmanya Tilak raised was, Swaraj is my birthright and I shall have it. And because of the sacrifices and the contribution made by these great leaders, today we are able to breathe in the free air. We have our own rights, right to speak, right to act. All these fundamental rights we have today is because of these great heroes who sacrificed their lives. They made so many contributions for the society, for their nation. So thank you so much, and in the next class we are going to continue with the predecessors of the Indian National Congress, foundation of Indian National Congress, and what were the objectives of Indian National Congress. And please children, make sure that you carry at least 4 to 5 points from every factors that I have explained, and take good notes and take down other examples as well. Thank you. See you in the next class.